Welcome to Everything Fear. Today we're going to be doing a review of the 2020 remake of the movie Castle Freak. Hello and welcome to Everything Fear, your one-stop shop for all things horror. I'm Kit Tinsley, I'm a horror author, film academic and general horror geek. If you enjoy this video, if you could please subscribe, give us a like and maybe tickle that bell icon to be notified when we upload future content, that would be great, thank you. Now today we're going to be looking at the 2020 film Castle Freak. This is a remake of the 1995 Full Moon entertainment film directed by Stuart Gordon. This is also going to be a tag team review with my good friend Kainan over at Ghost Pirate Entertainment, but more about that later.
You're so soft! You're so soft!
So, as I say, Castle Freak is a remake of the 1995 movie directed by Stuart Gordon, and it was inspired by several short stories by H.P. Lovecraft. This remake, or as the poster tells us, bold reimagining of Castle Freak, is directed by Tate Steinsiek, who has had a successful career in special effects. This new version is also produced by iconic horror star Barbara Crampton, who actually starred in the original 1995 version of Castle Freak. The original followed on from Gordon's earlier Lovecraft adaptations, Reanimator and From Beyond. Compared to those, Castle Freak was a far less out there movie, in many ways a more classical horror movie, reliant more on tension and atmosphere than on gore and extravagant special effects. The remake follows a young woman called Rebecca, who is blinded in a car accident caused by her drunk driving boyfriend. As she's recovering from her accident and getting used to her life without her eyesight, she inherits a castle in Albania from her biological mother, who has committed suicide. Rebecca and her boyfriend move into the castle to appraise it and prepare everything for sale. Rebecca becomes convinced that there is someone else living in the castle with them, but her boyfriend thinks she's just being paranoid. When their friends turn up to party, the freak that has been stalking the castle walls begins a bloody rampage. So what did I like about this movie? Well, in the opening scenes, there is some wonderful cinematography, some beautifully composed shots and fantastic lighting. The lighting has a really cool retro vibe in one of the early scenes. Very neon 80s looking. Also retro is the opening credits, which are really cool. They're really sort of old school style horror movie opening credits, really good. The first scene after the opening credits plays out to the song Dark All Day by one of my favourite bands, GUNSHIP, so for me that was a big bonus for this film straight away. On an interesting side note, the song Dark All Day by GUNSHIP features saxophone by Tim Capello, the I Still Believe man from The Lost Boys, and the video for the song is a animated homage to The Lost Boys and several other vampire movies. It's a really cool video and a really great song. If anyone's interested, I'll put a link in the description below to the video for that song. Back to Castle Freak. The acting overall in this movie is pretty good. I mean, nobody stands out as being particularly bad in this film, which is always a good thing. Claire Catherine, who plays the lead Rebecca, is actually quite good in this film, and her portrayal of blindness is really convincing and never seems over the top, which is always the danger when an actor with sight is pretending to be blind. But she does this really convincingly. I was very impressed with that. The castle itself is fantastic and makes a great setting for the movie, and the fact that it's filmed in a real castle adds this sort of grandeur to the proceedings that probably couldn't have been attained on the budget in a set. The special effects are really good. Both the practical makeup effects and the CGI in this movie are all really quite good. The gender swapping of the freak from male in the original to female in this movie is actually really good and adds a whole new dimension to the character and gives her motivation an interesting twist. The film delves deeper into Lovecraft mythos than the original did, with the freak being some form of subhuman creature as opposed to a human who has been beaten into a freak, basically. They've spent their whole life being abused and their body is broken and bent and twisted. There are also tentacles aplenty, a copy of the Necronomicon, and the character of the Professor attends Miskatonic University, the fictional university created by Lovecraft. Lovecraft's elder god Yog-Sothoth shows up, and in a post-credit scene we see the Professor back at Miskatonic University, where he greets a man he calls West, who has a container of glowing green liquid. This is obviously a reference to Herbert West, the Reanimator. The last 30 minutes of the film are absolutely batshit crazy and entertaining as hell. It has some disgustingly gory and funny moments in that last 30 minutes. What didn't I like? Well, despite the wonderful cinematography in those opening few scenes, the look of the film soon becomes rather uninspiring. It looks like a low-budget 90s movie. Anyone who's a horror fan knows those sort of movies and knows that look. Now, I don't know whether this was a conscious decision because it's a remake of a low-budget 90s movie, but it was kind of distracting. The fact that there's a 50-minute gap between the first death in the pre-credit scene and the next death would be acceptable if that time had been spent developing the characters. However, most of the characters in this movie don't get much development and remain kind of two-dimensional. So it feels like this is a wasted opportunity, and if some of that middle had been trimmed down, we would have got to the brilliance of the ending of the film much quicker, because for me, the midsection felt like it dragged quite a lot. Another thing I wasn't keen on was there was far too much sex in this movie. Now, I have no problem with sex scenes in horror movies. Hey, I like boobs as much as the next man. But the sheer amount of sex scenes in this movie and the way they were shot, especially considering what I've said about the 90s style cinematography, it kind of made you feel like you were watching some of those 90s softcore cable movies. You know the ones I'm talking about. Don't pretend you don't. On the whole, though, I think that this was an admirable effort at remaking a lesser-known 90s horror movie. What it changes definitely works for the better than in the original, although this movie is lacking the sort of horror icon star power that the original had, starring both Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton. That post-credit sequence with Herbert West suggests that maybe this is going to be the start of a series of remakes of the classic Stuart Gordon directed Lovecraft films. And if so, that's probably a wise decision, because if they'd have gone straight out doing something like Reanimator or From Beyond, those films are so popular and so well loved that people would have been against it straight away. The lesser known and not as highly regarded Castle Freak was a good starting point to show what they intended to do. So, as I say, this is a tag team review with my friend Kainan over at Ghost Pirate Entertainment. Kainan does some wonderful horror movie videos. He's a great guy, really entertaining, so please go and check his channel out. I will put the link down in the description below. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and until next time, stay scared.